Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by Inside the Penguins, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and the NHL playoffs continue to ramp up and lead us toward the 2024 Stanley Cup champion. 4 teams remain. We will preview and predict both of those series, the East and West finals, as we got 4 very interesting teams vying, for Lord Stanley's Cup. But before we get into that, some Penguins news we need to get into, a couple coaching headlines over the last couple of days. But let's start here. Bryan Rust is, at the moment, the Penguins' number one winger, right? That mantle had been held by Jake Guentzel for a long time. But now, with Guentzel out the door, it's all on Bryan Rust's shoulders, at least at the moment. He's coming off of a bounce-back season with 28 goals and 56 points in 62 games. Do you think the Penguins need another winger ahead of him, whether that's via trade, via free agency? Do you think that they need another winger to supplant Bryan Rust at the top of the food chain for the Penguins?
I don't know if supplant is the proper word, because whenever you discuss wingers, you can kind of discuss he's the top right winger or he's the top left winger. You can have that distinction. As of right now, period, point blank, he is the top winger on the team. Doesn't matter what side of the ice. Just considering the season he had, and then without Jake Guentzel there, it's some of his teammates right now. I would say when it comes down to it, yes, I would say the Penguins do need to find someone to supplant Bryan Rust. If it's not necessarily for the production, I think Rust's production this past season was fine, but the Penguins need someone that is just outstanding beginning to end, and can produce from the beginning of the season to the end of the season nonstop, and have one of those just offensive-minded forwards that can play alongside Sidney Crosby, can help him continue his career the way it should be, or even bump to that second line and help Evgeny Malkin stay as youthful as possible. And speaking of youth, I'd say another reason why you got to find someone to supplant Bryan Rust in this situation is that age. Bryan Rust is 32, I believe, 31 or 32, and is not getting any younger. He's fighting off Father Time as best as he can too. But the Penguins need a team that can be younger, faster, and while Bryan Rust is still a useful piece, I'm not saying to get rid of him. I'd say there are better options that can file in above him in the lineup.
I agree that the Penguins would 100% be better off if they were able to find that guy. But I do think that Bryan Rust has the ability to handle a mantle of that stature.
Yes.
Right? I do think that he could be the top left or right, no matter how you split it. He could be the top winger on a very good team. I think he has the talent. I think he has the ability. I think he has the hockey IQ, and also he has the desire to play that 200-foot game that is going to lend itself to getting those major minutes, because he's already gotten them. I mean, let's not lie and say he hasn't played with Sidney Crosby over the past 5 seasons. It just hasn't been as the top dog. That's been Guentzel's mantle. That's been Guentzel's role. But I think that this is a role that if they bestow it upon Bryan Rust, that I think he could handle it. And I think for the reason that I believe this is what we already saw this past season. I mean, without Guentzel, after that February 14th injury that he suffered against the Florida Panthers, Bryan Rust went 25 games, 14 goals, and 26 points. That's a pace of 46 goals and 85 points. And you did mention a very important thing there is, can he do it consistently? And that's always been the rub with Bryan Rust, that when he has been healthy, he's been inconsistent. And there have been a lot of times where he hasn't been healthy. He's only played 70 games twice in his 10-year career. So that's going to be the biggest question mark for me. If they end up rolling with Bryan Rust as the top dog, is, can he stay in the lineup? Can he stay healthy to be that right-hand man for Sidney Crosby? Because I think if he's in the lineup and there is no Guentzel, I think that you saw him step up to the plate late in the season, and I think he could do it again if asked to.
Yeah, I think he could. Like, I'm agreeing with you in saying that he can handle that sort of pedestal. He can handle that mantle. He can handle that sort of pressure. It's just the Penguins need, it feels like at least they need that second player that can be well over a point per game, that can help drive offense. For a team that struggled to score at certain points of the season, they need scoring, period. And a good winger can definitely do that. Again, like this is not, none of this is a knock against Bryan Rust himself. Again, he can handle these sorts of things. And that's why I said if the Penguins get that sort of winger, that Mitch Marner type, placing him on the second line might be best because Bryan Rust will have that spot on the top line, because Bryan Rust is going to have that pairing with Sidney Crosby that should balance well with those two, and a second pairing winger might open something up for Evgeny Malkin, who essentially would be like adding another player to this equation. Not that Evgeny Malkin isn't already a great player, but adding that extra level, you're making in my head, it's making sense that Sidney Crosby and Bryan Rust are a good 1-2. Evgeny Malkin is going to be great with Michael Bunting, but then can be even better with another name. So now all of a sudden, you have 5 definite great forwards, fill in with a 6th somewhere, and who knows how the top 6 rolls. And that's why in my head, I'd say yes, Bryan Rust can handle that mantle, but at the same time, a second just outstanding winger would be great for this team.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it late in the season. It was Drew O'Connor, and not to knock Drew O'Connor, but he's not, and he wasn't of the level of a top line player coming into this season. And it's not like he blew you away. Yes, he was incredible for what our expectations were going into this season. Those expectations are raised next year. We'll see where he starts the year. And I do think that he could be a top line guy if the Penguins indeed get that player and say, you know what, we want to make it Michael Bunting, Evgeny Malkin, and player XYZ, whoever is supposed to be the next big winger that comes in. That gives you a really good balance between the top 2 lines. So I like where you're going with that. And this all leads to the question we asked, and we lead off this show with, is our weekly Pens poll. We asked, what is Bryan Rust's ceiling in 2024? And I was a little surprised because I don't know if it's because we're a month removed from the season. I don't know if it's because of that run Bryan Rust had towards the end of the season, but the leading point getter in this, the leading vote getter in this was people believe his ceiling is a career year still at the age of 32. 30 to 40 goals and 70 points took home the prize here with 37% of the vote. Second place was a basically typical season for Bryan Rust, the best that he's shown to this point. 25 to 30 goals and 60 points. 30% of vote getters said that. And then 19% said he has another down season like he did 2 years ago, 25 to 20 goals and 20 to 25 goals, and 50 points, got 19%. And then nobody believes that he's going to go out there, or at least less people believe that he's going to go out there, score 40 plus and put up 80 plus, which he was on pace to do with that last quarter of the season. 14% said that that's where he could finish off. So Horwat, I'll ask you, what is Bryan Rust's ceiling in 2024 if given these options?
I'll have to say 30 goals is definitely the bare minimum. It's astonishing looking at his career. I can't think of too many more players that have just been absolutely just screwed over by A, injury, B, the pandemic. I mean, it looks like each season that he's played, at least in the past couple of years, on pace for 30 goals, on pace for 30 goals, on pace for 30 plus, 30 plus, 30 plus. But a season ended early, a season shortened, injuries, an 81 game season there he just kind of struggled in. I don't think we need to talk too much about last year. And then this year, a career high in goals, which I don't think was discussed. I mean, it was one more than his previous career high, so it's not like an astonishing number. But 28 is his career high, and I think we are all well aware that he can easily jump that. He can easily hit 30. He can easily go past 30. I mean, that was 28 goals in 62 games. Again, it's not the greatest pace he's ever been on in his career, but it's proof that he can hit 30 if he can stay healthy. And even with some minor bouts of inconsistency, there's still a chance to hit 30. So I'd say 30 is the bare minimum, which obviously means he can have another career year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that I have kind of a 2-part answer here, not to cop out on what the actual answer is, but I think my first answer would be the one that everybody voted there, the 30 to 40 goals and the 70 points, a career season, definitely a 10-point increase on his career numbers. I could see that happening next season if they even go out and sign a new winger. But if they don't, and if Bryan Rust is the guy going into next season, I could see him surpassing that 40-plus goal mark, and I could see him surpassing a point per game, simply because he's playing with a guy in Sidney Crosby that is an alien, that even at the age of 37, whatever he's going to be next year, he's going to be an absolute freak once again. And I think the fact that Bryan Rust would be his number one option on that line is going to lead to a heck of a lot of offense. We saw it at the tail end of the season. It's not like 25 games played isn't a lot. That is over a quarter of the season. And also, before he got injured the first time, he played at a 40-goal pace again at the beginning of the 2023-24 season. The question is going to be, can he stay healthy? So if they end up making him the number one guy, and if he's able to stay healthy next year, there's no reason that Bryan Rust can't be a 40-goal scorer in this league. He has all the tools. He just hasn't put it together in 10 years, but he might be in the position now where all he has to do is stay healthy and play his game, and he could be right there. So I have faith that that is his ceiling. Again, that is the big word in this one, is ceiling. What could he get to realistically? I think if those two things fall into place, I'd go with the 40 goals and 80 points. But if the Penguins go out there and get, for instance, you mentioned a guy like Mitch Marner, if they get somebody of that ilk, then I'd say the ceiling goes down a little bit, because there's only so many goals that can go around with this team, especially when you look at the top power play unit. There's already a lot of names that are considered to be on that unit. Then I would probably bump it down and say his ceiling is 30 to 40, which would still be blowing past a career high if he's anywhere in the mid-30s, and 70 points, which again would blow past his career high, which I believe is 58. I don't think he's reached 60 yet. So again, that would be far and away a career high if he's around the 70-point mark. So that's what I see as his ceiling based on what happens over the next couple of months.
Yeah, 28 goals is the career high. Is the career high there. 58 points in 21-22, a couple seasons ago. So yeah, it's possible to surpass all those numbers. And I mean, yeah, there's only so many goals to go around, but also there's not a cap on the amount of goals you can score.
There's not. Yeah.
So there are only so many to go around, but at the same time, it's easy to, or not easy to, it's the Penguins. It's possible to exceed the expectations of goal scoring, to see someone like Sidney Crosby find a new itch for scoring goals late in his career, to get Evgeny Malkin back on his train, who's 2 goals away from 500 in his career, I believe. And maybe they find a goal scoring winger. We don't know what's out there completely yet. We don't know what kind of trades might be happening. We don't know what the young forwards that might come up and play in the NHL are going to bring. There's a ton of different variables that are going into this Penguin season. And boy, if Bryan Rust can be part of that 30-goal group, that's going to be a bonus. And you're right, he can handle the top line, but at the same time, they need another gunner. I'll just keep falling on that line. They just need another guy who can score.
Fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about some coaching news surrounding the Pittsburgh Penguins, not all necessarily pertaining to the Pittsburgh Penguins, as head coach Mike Sullivan was named the head coach of Team USA for the upcoming Four Nations face-off in 2025 and the 2026 Winter Olympics in Italy. Now, he was named the head coach for the Olympic team back in 2022. The NHL obviously pulled out, decided they were not going to go, so Sullivan lost that opportunity. But with Bill Guerin as the general manager of Team USA for the upcoming, Olympic and international play, he gives his old buddy another chance in Mike Sullivan. So Sullivan, head coach of Team USA for the foreseeable future. Horwat, what are your thoughts on this?
It's the right choice from both a coaching perspective and a human perspective, in terms of, you're right, he had that opportunity to go to the Olympics in 2022. The NHL pulled out, and now, there's a vacancy of who will it be? Who could it be? Still just seems like Mike Sullivan's the best available head coach in terms of Team USA, because hockey is one of those it's a Canadian sport. It's hard to find the American coaches. It's Derek Lalonde coaching Team USA right now, right? In Czechia for that tournament for the World Championship. So it's slim pickings when it comes to American coaches, but it's still a good choice. I think it's going to be a good option for Team USA to go with, especially at the Four Nations face-off, which is going to be a bit of a different international tournament. We'll see what it looks like, how it goes. But then more importantly, obviously, the Olympics in a couple years' time. So I like the choice for Team USA. I think Mike Sullivan is a great coach. I know people are going to get on, well, what has he done with the Penguins? It's not what we're here to discuss. I mean, those opinions are valid and those thoughts are valid because it's him coaching this team and it's done what it's done. But again, I don't know, other than Derek Lalonde off the top of my head, I don't know any other USA head coaches.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're about to tell me some.
Yeah, the head coach for Team USA right now is actually John Hines, former head coach of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and obviously head coach in several places throughout the National Hockey League.
So Derek Lalonde Canadian?
He's
American.
He's American. So you have two other options there. But again, when you have a guy the pedigree of Mike Sullivan, and I understand that he has not had a lot of success with the Penguins over recent seasons, 2 missed postseasons, hasn't won a playoff series since 2018, and that comes with its own set of issues within the Penguins organization. But I think nationally and internationally, I think you realize again that everybody views Mike Sullivan as one of the best hockey coaches in the world right now, and certainly one of the best U.S.-born hockey coaches in the world at the present moment. Not to mention, it helps when you have a previous relationship with the general manager, which is Bill Guerin. So definitely congratulations to Mike Sullivan. He earned it back in 2022. He still deserves it at this moment, and it's a huge moment for Mike Sullivan. Now, what he does with the Penguins, that's going to be interesting because
we will be discussing it. Don't worry.
Trust me, we'll still be following along with what he does with the Penguins. But if he struggles with the Penguins and then goes out and wins a gold medal for Team USA, I think the entire fan base might just explode.
Twitter will be a hellscape. Well, it already is, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was about to say Twitter's not really, a really nice place to be anymore. But at the end of the day, congratulations to Coach Sullivan. It is a nice moment and a nice day and a nice achievement and a nice honor for him. As he put it, he said it's an honor to be able to be in this position. So congratulations to Sully. But a little bit more news on the coaching carousel. Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet on his 32 Thoughts, the podcast, named John Snowden as a front runner for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton head coaching position. Obviously, the Penguins' American Hockey League affiliate. Snowden is a former head coach of the Newfoundland Growlers of the East Coast Hockey League, winning the 2019 Kelly Cup in his first season as a head coach ever. He was an assistant for the Orlando Solar Bears, and then he moved over to the Newfoundland Growlers as an assistant, was elevated to head coach midway through the season, and took him on a run to a Kelly Cup championship. Since then, he has been an assistant with the Toronto Marlies under a couple of very obviously interesting names. And last year, he spent the season as an assistant coach for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the Philadelphia Flyers organization. So, Horwat, you're the one that wrote this story. What are your thoughts on Snowden being the first name to emerge for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins head coaching position?
He's a younger face in his early 40s. I don't think you need to go too much further than that connection with Kyle Dubas and Jason Spezza from their time together in the Maple Leafs organization. I mean, Kyle Dubas brought him in to coach the ECHL team, whether it was assistant or head coach capacity. Eventually he became director of hockey ops for that team, by the way.
He did.
A little bit of a bump there. And then going on to assistant coach of the Toronto Marlies. It's the AHL position, so maybe Sheldon Keefe was a bit of a pie in the sky dream, but you just never knew. This seems like another good option. Seems to be a successful coach at the minor league level. May not have the NHL pedigree yet, but I don't think you need to look too much further than that familiarity with the guys making the hire. And that's perfectly okay for this situation because if they like what they see and they know what they have in a guy like Snowden, then by all means, get him in there and let him. It would be his first AHL head coaching job, so it would be a bit of a new role, but I think still one that can prove to be pretty successful. I know Kyle Dubas and Jason Spezza want to have a robust minor league system. I think a fresh name might be an interesting choice for it, but could work.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of these coaching hires come from is, hey, what previous experience do we have with you and what have you done when we've employed you previously? And obviously when you go out there and you win a Kelly Cup championship, that's going to add a lot to your resume. That's going to put you higher in the stack of resumes that people are looking through. And I don't know how many names you're going to get that actually come out for this American Hockey League position. So to hear this name and to see all the connections with it, I think you would have to imagine that he is probably far along in the process or high on their list of potential candidates for the American Hockey League position, especially because we're entering the conference finals right now. And at that point, you look at where the coaching carousel is. Yeah, you have Craig Berube, who was hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs, or at least expected to be hired. I'm not sure where they are based on the way everybody says it.
They hired him, yeah.
So 41st coach of the Maple Leafs is Craig Berube, but some of these positions are going to start to get filled, especially as the playoffs come to an end, because general managers, quite frankly, they're going to want to move on to the next phase of the offseason, which is preparing for the draft, which is preparing for free agency, which is talking to the free agents that you currently have and trying to make sure that you bring back the pieces that you want. We've seen the Penguins do a couple of those already with a guy like Sam Poulin and a guy like Valtteri Puustinen. They have a couple of other big names on there. Jack St. Ivany could be a big piece next year. He still needs a contract. P.O. Joseph, what are they going to do with him? Do they end up trying to get him to a new contract? So there's going to be things. And again, you mentioned it in your story. Jason Spezza is heading up this particular position. So maybe it doesn't take too much off of Kyle Dubas's docket, but it's still a piece of business I would assume that they want behind them in the next few weeks. So keep an eye on the AHL coaching news. I don't know if you're going to get very many more updates. So maybe this is the guy. Maybe there's another candidate or two, but I think that John Snowden is certainly an interesting name and one that I would not be surprised if ends up being the guy that comes in at the end of all of this.
And it's more names than we've gotten. And
well, yeah,
we're not going to hear big names going for the AHL job. You do have to kind of find what makes them fit with the Penguins, and this one is that connection. And when it comes to the rest of the league filling out their positions, I mean, none of these four teams that are left are going to fire their head coach. None of them are going to look for a new guy. They're pretty set. They're going to move on next season with who they have in place. So it's up to whoever's available as a free agent head coach to start interviewing for those spots. Those teams are going to start asking around. The Maple Leafs had a quick transition despite wanting to take their time with it. I noticed the Maple Leafs one was just funny. They said, we're going to take our time. We're going to do our proper intel, do whatever. They were the last team to fire their head coach and the first team to hire a new one. Patience pays off. I mean, they got the big name though. So for them, that's a win. Everyone else needs to fill up their spots, and we'll see what kind of names float out there. For what it's worth, Todd Reardon is still a head coach or still a coaching free agent. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, all we know is he's not coming back to Pittsburgh or the Penguins organization anytime soon. But at the end of the day, coaching news is coaching news, and it is you're reliant upon somebody else's reporting in this instance, and that's Elliot Friedman. I choose to trust Elliot Friedman. I think that is certainly, in Snowden, a very intriguing name for sure. Let's close this out with our conference finals predictions. The final four are set, Horwat. Let's start over in the East. The Florida Panthers have been an absolute wagon throughout this postseason, but they're taking on a New York Rangers team that, save for the last couple of games there, they lost 2 straight against the Carolina Hurricanes, and it looked for a minute that they were about to lose 3 straight and go into a Game 7. The Rangers have looked pretty dominant as well. Should be a really intense series. Should be a really physical series between these two teams. Who do you got coming out of the East here?
Oh, man. My prediction of Colorado, Carolina came to an end in this last round, so I'm going to have to make a change. But I will stick with Florida. They just look like a more complete team, a more confident team. The way New York played in those 2 losses and then up until the third period of that Game 6, it's just something didn't feel complete, didn't feel right. I don't understand the Rangers, to be totally honest with you. They have great pieces. They have great players. I love Chris Kreider. I do. I'm not a huge fan of the Rangers, but I think Chris Kreider is an awesome hockey player to watch. But then their goaltending confuses the heck out of me all the time. I get Shesterkin's one of the best in the world, but some of the goals he lets in are just muffins. That being said, I think the Florida Panthers just feel more well-rounded and can win in a series that can go in any direction, whether it is clean, dirty, high-scoring defensively. They have whatever it takes. They're the complete 6-tool team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting in this matchup because I don't think there is one glaring separation. There's not one area where it's like, oh, there's an obvious advantage here. Just look at the goaltending. Just look at the defense. Just look at the scoring from the defense. I mean, you have Adam Fox going up against the Florida Panthers team that has a heck of a lot of players that just love to score from the blue line. Brandon Montour has been very good at that throughout his career. Aaron Ekblad has been very good at that throughout his career. So there's no one clear advantage on either side of these things. And it's going to be difficult for either team. I think it's a long series no matter what. But like you mentioned, that Florida Panthers team, there's just no holes on them. Now, are the Rangers similar in that aspect? Yeah, they won the President's Trophy for a reason. They started this postseason 7-0. They have, a guy in Artemi Panarin that can take over a series. They have a guy in Chris Kreider that can, as we just saw, take over an entire game. And they have that goaltender that can do the same thing as well with Igor Shesterkin, not to mention one of the best home ice advantages in the National Hockey League is the Garden in the playoffs. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for either team. I think that the one determining factor for me is that Florida Panthers team has been there and done that before. This is uncharted territory for most, if not all, because obviously Chris Kreider was on that 2014 team that went to the Stanley Cup final, but this is uncharted territory for that New York Rangers team. Not to mention, and this doesn't actually play a role, but I just wanted to mention it, they're now the only show in town in New York. The Knicks blew it, so now all the pressure falls on the Rangers' shoulders. So with that, I think they fall just short, and I'm going to go Panthers in 7 games in this one. I think that the world deserves a 7-game series between these two, and I think that they give them to them. So I'm going to go Panthers in 7, breaking the hearts of everybody in New York on Broadway in Game 7 at MSG.
I'm going to take Florida in 6. And another thing you have to remember about the Rangers is I'll keep falling on it. Every now and again, Mika Zibanejad just has a 4 or 5 goal performance.
He does.
Yeah, I don't think he's done that yet this season. So he's got one locked and loaded. Maybe at least a 3-goal, 2-assist performance is still sitting somewhere for him. But Florida in 6, they just feel like the better team at the moment.
Now, who do you think would fight Matt Rempe if it came to it?
No one, because
you don't think Tkachuk would get in there?
No, because Matt Tkachuk understands the trade-off of losing each of those guys for 5 minutes. Also, Matt Rempe doesn't get enough ice time for guys to try and fight him, aka 4 minutes a game. The one stat I saw was hilarious. And then we can move on. The Rangers Hurricanes game that went to double overtime, whatever. It's like however many minutes that is in a game, 60, about 100 minutes of a hockey game. Played 4 minutes of it.
Yeah,
just stop suiting him up. Got to be on. I'm over the Matt Rempe thing. Giddy made a name for himself, but at this point, the Rangers are trying to put the best lineup on the ice. Why do you think Chad Ruhwedel hasn't played yet? They have better players than him.
Fair, but also at the same time, whenever a game does get like that, who better to have than a absolute freak of nature and a giant? So,
right, just might be wasting a roster spot. That's all.
When you're done, the rest of your team's as good as the Rangers are. I think they're fine wasting a roster spot. Now that might cost them against the Panthers, and that might be where it all runs out. But it's worked up to this point. I mean, they beat. Okay, who did they beat in the first round? The Rangers beat the
Washington Capitals.
Yeah, so they beat the Capitals. That's not that impressive, but they beat the Carolina Hurricanes fairly handedly. They had a 3-0 series lead, and then obviously the Hurricanes were a good team, so they came back and won 2 games. But it's worked to this point. They're 8-2 so far in these playoffs. Why break it or why change it if it isn't broken? So let's move over and finish this episode off talking about the Western Conference Finals. Edmonton Oilers punched their ticket with a Game 7 victory in Vancouver, so they can definitely play in hostile territory when the lights are the brightest. They take on the Dallas Stars in the Western Conference Finals. The Stars last year made it to the conference finals and then fell short against the eventual champion Vegas Golden Knights. They've taken out the Vegas Golden Knights, the 2023 champions, and the 2022 champion Colorado Avalanche in the first 2 rounds of this series. Do you think they take down Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Edmonton Oilers?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Something about playoff McDavid. He's still a monster and a freak, but every playoffs, Leon Draisaitl ends up looking better.
Yes.
It's a weird dichotomy, but a good one to have for that team. But man, that goaltending is still questionable. I mean, and they went 7 games against a third string goalie who I mean, we'll discuss him in a minute, I'm sure. But I just think Dallas in this situation, they're coming in with that chip on their shoulder of they were here last year. What did they do? They just went through 2 recent Stanley Cup champions to get to this point. And they're going to go up against a team that has so much to prove and has all of the pressure on them at all times, that maybe that becomes too much for them. Dallas feels like a good choice in this situation. I can't remember how far I expected Dallas to make it. I think I had them losing each round so far. So I may as well finally roll with them and say I think that Dallas can take this, especially over a team that just at times looks sloppy.
Mm-hmm. I know how far I had Dallas taking it. Both preseason and now. I had Dallas taking it all. So far, I do have a couple tickets stowed away that I might be going to a nice little dinner here if they can pull something off in the next couple of weeks. But you mentioned the biggest factor for me, and I always look at goaltending, especially in these matchups where I haven't watched the teams all season, but I've watched obviously most of the playoffs. When you look at what happened, first of all, going into the last series for Edmonton, I got an issue apology to my guy, Artur Silovs, because I gave him no chance against the Edmonton Oilers offense, and he stood tall. Like, he wasn't great. He wasn't Vezina Trophy caliber, but he was the better of the goaltenders, all 3 of them in that series. Stuart Skinner got pulled, Stuart Skinner got benched, and Silovs was the guy that entire series. So I got to issue an apology to that man right there. And then I also got to take a dunk or whatever you want to call on Stuart Skinner. Yeah, I'll take a dump on Stuart Skinner. He's the reincarnation of 2010's Marc-Andre Fleury right in front of our eyes. He can't stop a puck. He has an .881 save percentage going up against a team in the Dallas Stars that is stacked from top to bottom. You got veterans that have been very, very good for that team, and a Joe Pavelski, and trying to think of, why can't I think of the other name right now? Ryan Suter as well. I think they got a good mix there of young guys. Logan Stankoven's been an absolute monster in these playoffs. Jason Robertson has also been very good in this postseason, let alone bringing up the guy in Miro Heiskanen, who has been a freak of nature. He outdueled Cale Makar in that series against Colorado. I'm just going to ride the hot hand. I'm going to ride the hand that I've been backing Dallas since we did our preseason prediction. So I'm going to keep doing it here. Stars in 6. I think that Edmonton does get a couple of wins off simply because those high-end stars are just impossible to keep off the board for an entire series. So I think they do get a little bit of their licks in, but I'm going with Dallas in 6, and I'm setting up the same final as you. Stars, Panthers, and man, would that one be interesting.
Oh, it'll be that. Yeah. Man. Yeah. The markets in terms of hockey markets, not great, but screw it. That's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss good hockey. And if you're a hockey fan, you're going to enjoy that series. I have Dallas in 5, by the way. Think the steam has run out on the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, you mentioned that, Skinner has an .881. He had an .883 last year. Like, this is nothing new for the Oilers to be facing.
2010's Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, and if your backup option is Calvin Pickard, and he seemed to be okay in his couple of games in. He only got 1 loss, and then they said that's enough of that. They're clearly not too trustworthy in their goaltending if those are your 2 options. And if your third is someone you had in the AHL all season because he couldn't stop a beach ball either. And Jack Campbell got that one correct this time, guys.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, if they decide to go back to CC Nurse, they're so screwed because that's a duo that just has gotten caved in time and time again. Good on Cody Ceci for opening the scoring last night, though. But, yeah, I just see Dallas being the more dominant team. You mentioned all those names. Did you even mention Wyatt Johnson?
No, I did not mention Wyatt Johnson.
The guy right now.
Yeah.
The guy on that.
There's just too many players on that Stars team. I'm not going to say the easy pun. I'm not going to say the easy dad joke that's right in front of me. But I'm sure everybody else can think of it.
That's perfectly fine. But he's the guy for them right now, especially with on the team like that is so deep. Like, there are stars all over the place. There are great players all over the place. And yet these new fresh names, like you mentioned, Stankoven, Wyatt Johnson, and this young guy, Matt Duchene, Oh wait, no, sorry.
That's the other
Matt
veteran that
Duchene.
I was looking for. Yeah,
Yeah.
Matt Duchene.
That's a well-rounded team too, and
Mhm.
that would make for um, a phenomenal final of Florida and Dallas.
Yeah, you know the meme where it's the dragon heads and it's serious dragon, very unserious dragon.
Yes.
Let's add a third serious dragon, and that's Sergei Bobrovsky, Igor Shesterkin, Jake Ottinger,
Yep.
and then there's Mr. Unserious Stuart Skinner.
It's that. Do you remember that meme from the Final Four of the NFL a long time ago? It was all terrible quarterbacks, and like Blake Bortles was in there.
Yeah, that was like the 2017 playoffs, because that was the one that Blake Bortles beat the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
I'm fairly certain. So yeah, it was like Tom Brady, Blake Bortles. I don't remember who was out on the other side of it. 2017 would have been, I don't know. I'm not gonna do this on a podcast right now.
No.
But I'm certainly gonna look it up as soon as we're done here,
Yep.
which is actually right now. But both of us having Panthers Stars should be two very interesting conference finals series. Enjoy hockey, folks, because it is coming to a close very, very soon. Edmonton Oilers, Dallas Stars will be on TNT. Florida Panthers, New York Rangers will be on ESPN, and I'm crossing my fingers that it's on ESPN Plus. So we will wait and see in that one.
Can't be that easy.
I think it is. We're hoping. I thought I saw it yesterday during Game 7, but I was also half awake by the end of that Game 7. So that's what it is. But that is it for this episode of the Tip of the Iceberg podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. We will see you next time.